today I'm building a buckle. This will be my 4th buckle. And this one's a custom order. It'll have a brand. The design as of now is it will have 2 pieces of overlaid silver and then have a design to match this one. Can you see it?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the goal as of now. So right now I have the buckle drawn out. This is 14 gauge sterling, and then I'm measuring out the middle of it so I can measure the cutout for here. This customer says the widest buckle, or the widest belt that will be going with this is 1 3/4 inches. So I'm finding center and then I'm going to draw it out. Here's our buckle. So I need to cut it out, engrave these lines in it, and then overlay the brand in copper. So I think I'm just going to cut this right in half so I have a smaller piece to work with, and then put that one over there because it's not ready yet. Maybe I'll just cut this one since it's so close anyway. And I cut things just a tiny bit too long. Not too long, but to the right of the line. So I can take them to the sander over there and get a nice even line. Got the buckle blank all sawed out. I just use a jeweler's saw and this little blade. If you're someone who knows anything about buckles, or not necessarily buckles, but silversmithing, I use the Rio brand Laser Pro or Laser Gold, and these are number 2 blades. So my next step, it's kind of jaggedy on these sides here, but I'll probably cut this middle piece out first. So how I'm gonna do that is I'll bring my little steel block over, and okay, so I got it on my little block, and I'm just going to use a center punch. It doesn't matter if it focuses, it's just a punch. And I'm just gonna pick a corner. I'll probably do this back corner here and just make a little punch hole. It's hard to figure out this camera. Right there, you can see my little punch hole. So now I'm gonna bring it over to my bench pin. Right there. Oops. And just drill a hole so I can get my saw blade in there. Switch out my... So I'm going to use my flex shaft, basically like a fancy Dremel tool, and just a drill bit. Put a little bit of that Pepe lube on there. And just drill a hole. So now having a hole in there gives me a spot to put my blade through so I can get in here without having to come through the side anywhere. Okay. And now I'm ready to saw this middle piece out. And my blade broke. We're almost done though. We just have that bottom line left. Goodness. Okay. And there's our blank. Let's see.
Good.
So I just went around with this little wheel. You can get a pack of them from Amazon, and they just have these little teeth on them, and each one is a different grit. So I'm using this one that I think is, I can tell you, 400 grit. That's what they are, and they help get scratches out and polish pieces, so that's what I use just because it's easy. So now I need to put my stamp on the back, if I can find it. And I need to make sure I know which way a buckle goes. This way, right? So I'm double checking that this is the correct way because I had an order last month for 2 buckles and I did them backwards after I engraved the whole thing and overlaid the brand. So that was a nightmare, but I fixed it. But I won't do that again. Thing is like extra sensitive. It's like the buckle itself is so cold it's already stuck. Cooled the glue. So now I just glued this buckle down to a block that'll go in my ball vise for when I engrave, and it just has some hot glue on it. So I reuse it and heat it up, and once it's cooled and dry, I'll put it in my ball vise and engrave it. So this one is a 105 graver, and looks like the tip broke off. So I started out with a more aggressive wheel, 600 grit, to get it polished down to where I need it to be, and now I'm buffing out all the big scratches with the 1200 grit. And then once it looks good there, I'll go to my ceramic lap and put a shiny face on it.
Did you grow up ranching?
I did not grow up ranching. The only ranch experience I have, I've gotten after being a thing with Wyatt. Either married or when we were dating. Living on the ranch in Texas during the summertime when we were dating was the first ever ranch experience I've ever had. I don't consider myself a rancher or a cowgirl, but I do like making Western style jewelry for ranch wives and ranchy ladies. We grew up with horses and we always had at least 2 cows, but that's about it. Just a small little 2-acre Ranchette, whatever you'd call it. This is the hard part, trying to get every little dot perfectly placed. I'm trying to get these cuts fairly deep because silver is such a soft metal that it wears away quicker than other metals. So if you put your cuts deeper, they should last a lot longer. If you're wanting to get started in silversmithing, I'd figure out what you want to do. So my end goal when I started was to learn to engrave, but having the knowledge of basic metalsmithing was how I was able to get there as far as being able to pay for my equipment. But my biggest advice would be, if I were to be starting over, would be to find someone to either mentor you or go and take a class in person. I learned the best with hands-on experience and being able to ask somebody questions in real time rather than watching videos online. But there's also a lot of good online resources. YouTube has a ton of tips on soldering and basic tools and bezels and setting stones and pretty much anything you need to get started in metalsmithing. As far as engraving goes, I would find someone to teach you hands-on. Now that I've got the buckle all engraved, I'm putting some flux on it to prevent it from getting any fire scale or damage from fire and heat. And I'll take it off of this piece of wood, melt all the glue off the back of it, and then put it in the pickle pot. I don't know if I'll finish this today completely. Alright, so I've got the buckle engraved and ready to go. So next we'll be putting on the brand. They picked this top brand that's a little bigger, so I'm going to go ahead and get that on this piece of copper and saw it out with my jeweler's saw. I'm using 18 gauge copper for this, a little heavier copper for the buckle. So I'll go ahead and do that, and then we'll solder it onto our buckle. Copper's dirty. Another thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to draw just a little tiny line here, here, and just connect everything so that way I can cut it out all in one piece, and then after I get it soldered on I can go back in with my graver and just cut those little pieces away, or use like a little Dremel tool with a burr on it like this, and just clean up that little burr that's not supposed to be in there. I finished cutting the brand out, so now that it's all cut out and ready to go, I'm going to make some guidelines on my buckle blank that marks out the center this way and the center this way. So I'm kind of making this all up as I go. This is only my 4th buckle and my 3rd overlay brand buckle. So I measured this here and this here to get these 2 guidelines for this line. So that's center this direction. And then for this one, it was kind of tricky. I just measured halfway down this line to get the center of here, and I eyeballed it, and once I got my line drawn, I measured from this line to here and this line to here and vice versa. So this is pretty dang center. It looks good to me. I think the brand will look good on there. And I don't know if you saw, but you can see I drew some arrows to keep myself from screwing up again. My little brand is all cut out and ready to go. I've got the sides both trimmed down to fit the buckle. So I'm going to flip it over and put it down on my soldering bench. And I'm using some Handy Flux. This one here. I get it from Rio Grande. I just have it in a separate little container, but I'm just gonna paint this back side with flux. Now I'm going to put my medium solder on there and make sure the back is all nice and covered. I'm not going to use a flame that's too hot, because when you're soldering something like a little thin piece of metal, like these pieces are pretty dang thin, if you're not careful, they'll get too hot and melt away. So you have to cut it out again. Focus my heat on the G. You can see it start changing color. It's getting hot and ready for some solder. And I'm going to put a little bead on there, take my pick and push it around, make sure it gets all over. When I first got started, I used to cut little pieces every time I put solder on, but it takes a while. Takes a little longer, but it's definitely a lot cleaner than doing it this way. I think my flame was a little too big. Okay, that looks pretty good to me. I'd like to make sure all the little corners and ends have plenty of solder on them, because once you put it down there, it's definitely not easy to take it back off. I did go ahead and pull the brand out from the pickle pot a little sooner than I should have. I'm going to throw it back in there, but I want to get it all lined up and then paint this Rio No Flow. And basically you just make that into a little paste. And you'll just paint it on, I'll paint it all around the engraving. That way when I solder the brand on, the solder doesn't come down and fill in all my engraved spots. And just paint around where I'm going to be putting the brand. If this buckle was going to be fully engraved with scrolls or something that has a lot of detail to it, I probably would have put the brand down first and then stippled around it or wriggled around it, but the lines are pretty dang easy, so if I do happen to get some overflow into the engraved lines, it won't be that big of a deal to go back in and just recut them real quick. I've taken the brand out of the pickle pot, made sure it's nice and flat. Now I'm going to take my flux again and paint anywhere that doesn't have that Rio No Flow on it. And the flux helps the solder flow, and it also helps protect the silver from fire scale. So I like to be pretty generous with my flux, especially if I'm going to be doing something that involves high heat, like this will, because of the size and thickness of the buckle. And I want to make sure I get enough in here. Okay. Get it nice and lined up with my markings. Looks good to me. So this is called sweat soldering, when you're soldering one piece onto another flat like this. So the copper has solder on the underside, as you saw, and I'm heating from the bottom because solder flows in the direction of heat. So if I heat from the bottom, my goal here is to sweat that solder onto the buckle. If I were to heat from the top, the brand would get hotter than the buckle would, so the solder would melt, but it would come up to the top of the brand. Would yell at me for using my ball vise. I'd yell at someone for using a ball vise.
You do.
Hmm?
You do.
I know I do.
You yell at me.
That's good enough for me. Might clean up that edge a little bit and then get the back piece on there. Still looks a little bit too long. Cool. So I'm going to hammer this end fairly flat to get a nice tight fit around this part. Pretty messy. Oh man. Gorgeous. Gorgeous. Okay, this one. That shouldn't take as long. Voila. I want this to I like the way that lays. Yeah, mine is way too tall. And too thin. I need to redo it. for the third time. Okay, so we are at the point now where we can darken. So I have a little watercolor pen that has some Midas Black Max in it. And I'm just going to paint it on there. You can see it change color. Woo! How satisfying is that? Just getting all the little... And what this will do is after I darken it, I'll come back in with my really fine grit buffing wheel and buff off all of the darkening on the surface, and then it'll leave these lines nice and dark, and I'm going to leave around this brand dark. Get my little maker's mark. And you can clean your pieces like this at home too. This is soap and water. Voila. It's done. Well, here's the finished piece. I hope you found it interesting to watch me stumble through a buckle build. Overall, I'm happy with how it turned out, and maybe we'll do another one of these in the future.
Go ahead and talk.
Hello! A little messy over here. Sterling. Would you like to see? Well, here's the finished product. Hope you buy a buckle from me. Well, here's the finished piece. Okay. Hi, my name's Hunter Cook. I'm 24 years old. Why is it so hard to say after my name? My eye is twitching. Hi, my name's Hunter Cook. I'm 24 years old.